All right, everyone. Welcome to our live stream this evening. Comment below. Let us know where you are watching from this evening. And we're going to welcome Janice Mcfarland.
Yo.
And we have Doug Pfeiffer.
Yo.
MTV Raps.
Okay. Blast from the past.
And so we've done a live stream in the morning, 2 times in the morning at 8:30 a.m. And then we've done a live stream.
We're switching it up.
At like 1:15 a.m. So this is our first time doing a live stream in the evening. So we're very curious how many people are going to join in. And we have some interesting topics to talk about this evening. Janice has been doing a lot of research on. And I'm personally just really excited to listen to you and what you've learned and what you've read. And so, again, if you are watching, comment below.
Columbus.
Do we have a comment already?
Hi, sister. Hi, sissy. Thank you.
Thank you, family.
Thanks, fam.
Family and friends supporting us. It's always great.
Tell mom to share the link, too. Thank you.
Yes. Like and share this. We're also live on YouTube, so YouTube link is probably easier to share through a text message than it is on Facebook. And so we're going to be talking about undue influence. And yes, you're probably like, what the crap is that? Janice will explain later. But we're kind of getting things kicked off here. We're going to look at some reaction graphics and something that I was talking to Doug about. When was it? Our last live stream is how awesome this is that you have two professionals, two therapists that are on the live stream. You can ask them any question that you want in the comments. And so take advantage of that opportunity. I just think this is a great way. And one of our goals is to spread awareness and to help normalize mental health and addiction. And so I think this is a really great way for anyone who's watching on YouTube or Facebook. Comment below if you have any questions about anything pertaining to mental health, or if you don't really know what is mental health, comment below and we'll talk about it. And so let's get into it. So Janice, Doug and I have been doing reaction graphics that you find on like Instagram and stuff like that. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is something that's kind of been on my mind is shame and guilt that people that walk through that. So I have a graphic here and I'm going to read it to you guys. And so this is just really helpful because I think this is part of the stigma that we do to ourselves. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring this up right now. All right. So even if someone has it worse than you, you still deserve help. Other people's problems are not solved by you not getting help.
Amen.
And so how have you guys can you guys elaborate on that? What do you guys think of that quote?
Well, so as I usually do, is I try to take a different slant on that. So sometimes you can look at that other people may have it worse as a way to kind of realize that you're not in like you're not at rock bottom and you can move forward and you can get back up where you're at. But yeah, it's not that sounds like, okay, I'm being too prideful. Like I can't admit to, needing help because I would be ashamed to do that because other people have it worse than me. And that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because ultimately it's like, well, if you keep neglecting yourself, you're going to be on the other side of that quote. You're going to be the somebody doesn't have it as worse as me.
Yeah.
And you're going to get there if you keep neglecting yourself. You're going to keep going down that path and road and start feeling pretty bad.
Yeah.
You're not impressing anybody by neglecting yourself. So.
Well, I wanted to give an example, and I'd like to hear from you, Janice. Is I have a friend that is, he's just started going to therapy. He's been seeing some thinking patterns that he has. But how I see this is other people's problems are not solved by you not getting help. He would think, well, I shouldn't be complaining. I shouldn't be feeling this way because I have a nice house. I'm selling this house. I have a lot of money. A lot of people don't even have a family or and it's almost like he's shaming himself into not feeling the way that he feels. Like, I shouldn't feel this way because I'm so blessed.
Right. And that quote is a really good example of, in my opinion, a coping skill gone wrong. The coping skill of perspective taking is important and can be useful and very helpful. But perspective taking goes awry when you start rationalizing the other perspectives that you see to either minimize or magnify your own. So the fact that other people have things worse than you doesn't make your problem less important. One of the, and I can't remember where I heard it from, but it's similar, but kind of on the opposite side of it. If you are at like an orthopedic doctor and you have, your whole arm and like shoulder in a cast. Yeah. And somebody walks in a full body cast. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean your broken arm doesn't hurt. That just means that that person is experiencing more pain than you. It doesn't mean that your pain isn't real or that your pain isn't as important or that you getting in to see the doctor maybe before that person. None of that matters. Everything is relative. One of my favorite things that I've heard from listening to all kinds of stuff as I've done addiction work over the years is the idea of don't miss the trees for the forest, or don't miss the forest for the trees. Either way, it's kind of an important way to talk about perspective taking. Sometimes we can get so stuck on something so small that we forget to take a step back and look at the big picture. We forget how great life is because we're stuck on something that isn't going right at the time. And then flip-flop that, and that's how you get into denial, where you think that everything's okay because you're focused on the one good thing. Yeah. And you're missing the larger picture.
Well, and I also think that we spend too much time comparing ourselves to other people instead of comparing ourselves to ourselves. Right. So when you're looking at bettering yourself or coping or whatever, it's more helpful to compare yourself to how you were yesterday or a week ago or 6 months ago. Yeah. That is more helpful for our brain and for who we are in terms of coping than to say, well, so-and-so is much better than me or much, it doesn't, we're not the same. There's just, so we filmed a podcast episode this morning or midday, and he said and Tim Anderson, who's one of the guests, and he said we're all unique people, beings, that we're all our own, and that's so true. Like we're not all the same. Yeah, yes, we're all humans, but we're not. We all have unique differences and things that make us who we are. Yeah, right. So we can't possibly compare ourselves and gain any value out of that in terms of truly figuring out what we need for ourselves. Because, for example, what works for Janice in coping might not work for me and vice versa. So if I say, well, gosh, she copes much better than me, I should try what she's doing, and then I try it, that doesn't guarantee
work,
that it's going to work.
But there's also nothing wrong with looking at other people and how they cope, trying how they cope. But you just can't, like, you can't let the voice in your head make you think that there's something wrong with you because somebody else's way of coping doesn't work.
It's when you throw judgment in there. So because I'm not coping as well as Janice, then I'm bad, and that goes to your shame.
There's something wrong with me.
That goes to your shame process that you're talking about.
Yeah, very good. Well, we have a couple more. This is still the same quote, but even if someone has it worse than you, it doesn't make your struggle invalid. What hurts, and someone else's suffering doesn't remove or negate yours.
Yep.
So I thought that was also a very good quote too. Again, it's almost like we're using that language to avoid or negate how we feel and to put us into that shame spiral of I shouldn't feel this way.
Well, I think we're kind of crafted to respond to hardship that way from a small child. Like when you have small children, let's pick on you.
No.
So, so like when your kid falls down, skins their knee. Oh, it's not that bad. You're fine. You don't need to cry. I know that you do things differently with your children. Yeah. But as a representative,
Lily would be like, no. So there was this funny story, and I'll just get into it. We were playing soccer. I was coaching soccer. She's playing soccer, and she falls, and she's crying on the ground, like just a mess. I'm like, there's nothing wrong. It's just get up. It's fine. Get back in the game. And then they were like, that looks kind of swollen. Oh, and then turns out she kind of broke her finger. So, sometimes, I'm not perfect. But
also, like, that happens all the time. Like, I remember, like, in an effort to not get your kid to freak out about whatever has happened to them, whatever they're feeling, whether it's, like, physical or emotional pain, it's almost like this immediate reaction of, like, calm down, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. So, like, I feel like from a very early age, we are indoctrinated to be invalidated.
Well,
and then so as we become adults, it just happens more and more about bigger and bigger things.
So I'll take it in a different perspective because this happens in soccer a lot too. When I coach soccer with the little ones, and they get like a ball like smacked in their face or like hitting in their stomach, and the parents come running out on the field like crying. There is this kind of reaction, like if I am hurt, and then I see my parent hurt and freaked out. I don't want my parent to freak out, so then I don't want to show any emotion or pain, right? Because if I do, then I am hurting other people. And so then we are, we are communicating to others that, oh no, you can't be in a lot of pain, even though that's not in our intention. We're worried, we're concerned, we're going out there to want to help. But if we're in dysregulation, if we're all distressed, people are feeding off of the energy that we have. So that's typically what will keep us like, I can't be emotional around Janice because she'll freak out and she'll like melt down. So I have to stuff it really down so I don't hurt her.
If Bethany is still watching, she knows that I am a terrible flyer. I am the worst person to be on a plane with, to be near on a plane. The idea of flying, I don't want to understand it because then I'll overanalyze it. But Bethany, she's been all over the world in a plane.
Yeah.
Sometimes not in the best situations in the plane. And so every time we hit turbulence, I just dart my eyes to wherever she is. And I'm like, if Bethany's not freaking out, everything's fine. And so she does this thing when we're flying and we hit a lot of turbulence, even if she gets scared, she won't let me see that she's scared because she's like, if she starts to freak out, everybody's going to be unhappy.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what, it's a powerful. So I remember, I remember the story where one of the kids that I was coaching got hurt in the game, and I went out to the field and I just was like, okay, all right, breathe with me, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Like, I know you must be in a lot of pain right now. It's all right. I'm just kind of talking her through it. And then she starts to slow her breath down and calm down. And then she gets back into the game. And the mom texted me after and says, that was awesome because normally she sprints off the field and won't get back in the game. She sprints, she tries to find me, does find me, but no, we were able to keep her in the game and things like that. So what we did was I just helped this girl regulate, and manage her own emotional state and get through it. But when we, and so it helps her not be afraid of emotions, of pain, of, stress.
Well, and even like to take it outside of like an emotional experience and put it in something physical, I am very allergic to bees. But EpiPens are expensive, so your girl doesn't always have one. And there was one time many summers ago where I got stung like 4 times when I was mowing grass.
Yeah.
And my, of course, initial reaction was to absolutely panic, because I know what can go wrong. I know what can come next. And in that moment, I made like a quick decision of like, okay, call your mom, get her to come pick you up in case you do go into anaphylactic reaction, like on the way to the hospital. And I spent the whole time on the way to the hospital just trying to regulate my breathing, trying to regulate my heartbeat, because I understood the faster that my heart beat, the faster venom is going to course through my body, the more abnormal reactions I am going to have. And so I got in the car, and my mom was like the parent that sees their kid fall down, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I was like, we're not doing that right now, Marianne. Marianne, right now what we're doing is we are keeping a very calm energy.
Marianne, are you watching, and can you comment on that story? No.
And I got to the ER, and immediately they start giving me everything, because even if you hit yourself an EpiPen, you still have to go to the ER. So I was like, why waste the dose of an EpiPen? I'll just keep myself calm, have somebody else drive me. So like, being able to regulate ourselves isn't just about emotional or mental pain. Like, it can cause an actual physiological difference in the way that we experience actual physical pain.
Right. Well, and that's
from injury,
and that's all connected. So everything's connected. So that's the theme of the day. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
We talked about that today.
Yeah. So moving on to the last part of this quote is even if someone has worse than you, you don't get a prize for toughing it out. And so I thought that was good too.
We have a treasure box at our agency, so if anybody is able to tough it out, they get to pick from the treasure box.
Oh wow!
I'm just kidding.
I think I remember doing that in elementary school too.
Right.
I did that when I was leaving the dentist as a child.
That's true.
If I didn't freak out, you got to pick out of the treasure box.
Every time my kids go to the doctor, I get to get a sticker and a lollipop.
That's true. Yeah.
Hi, Abby.
And then even if someone has it worse than you, being able to cope without help doesn't make anyone a better or stronger person.
I love that, because that is one of my favorite myths that exist in the Mid-Ohio Valley, is that if you can do it completely on your own, there is something better or different about you. There may be something different about you, but it doesn't mean that you're better, and it doesn't mean that you're worse if you can't. It just means that everybody is an individual, unique person with different, unique needs. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To put pressure on yourself to do things. I was sharing with a client the other day, she was going through something, and she said, I feel so stupid. And I said, but there's absolutely no reason for you to feel stupid, because the issue that you have requires the help of other people.
I would also throw to independent versus dependent. Like, people don't want to feel dependent on people, a burden or whatever. And so I would also say that we also strive to be independent people. And I think people get too black and white and too dichotomous with it, that if you ever ask for help, then you're no longer independent.
Right.
Instead of just kind of recognizing that independence is not about every thing you do in your day. There's going to be things where you need more help, and there's situations, but for the most part, you're living your life independently, and there might be certain parts of your life where you want to be more independent, but you're striving to show everybody or show yourself that you can do things on your own, which might be kind of a badge of honor or whatever. The problem with that is, are you trying to handle something that is within your capability, or are you trying to handle something that is beyond your capability?
Yeah.
Like,
being able to be honest with yourself about the answer to that question is so hard. I remember it came to a head in December. It was like 2 days before New Year's that obviously last year was a dumpster fire for almost everyone.
I still think it's 2020. Like, I don't even think it's 2021.
It was a whole thing of fever dream. Do we even have it?
Matter?
They don't. So all of last year, I kind of fed into the idea that doing it by myself made me stronger, made me better, made me different, made me a better leader, meant that Doug had made the right decision in putting me in the position that he did. Like, to be able to shoulder all of it without help meant something about me. And it absolutely miserable, terrible, awful for my health, awful for my mental health. And it wasn't until the end of December when I went to Kaylee in April at the office, and part of being able to sit down and have that conversation with them and level with them about how overwhelmed I was and how much help I needed was getting over it myself, that like, no, you can't do everything. That is not realistic. That is not a realistic expectation. He's been trying to tell me to delegate forever.
It's hard to delegate.
But like, I couldn't be honest about what was in my control and what was outside of my control, and admitting that things were outside of my control. Does that make me bad? Does that make me incapable? Does that make me not independent enough to have this position, do this work, whatever? Like, there's so many questions that we tie to our self-esteem, to our self-image. First hurdle, like, if you can get over within yourself and the way that it affects your ego, the idea that doing things completely by yourself means that you are better than other people, again, removing the judgment from it, it makes it so much easier to ask for help and to let other people know what's going on with you.
Why weren't you delegating? What when looking back at that?
Because I was terrified that everybody else was just overwhelmed as me. And I didn't want, see, this is the justification in my head.
So it wasn't really about control. It was about.
No, it was absolutely about control.
Okay.
But the justification that I gave myself was, you can't ask other people for help, because if you do, they're going to get overwhelmed. They're going to get stressed, blah, blah, blah. The second I sat down and was like, I can't do this, both of them were like, yeah, we know, let us take X, Y, and Z from you. And I said, well, I don't want to overwhelm you guys. They said, you're not going to overwhelm us. Like, this is stuff that we can be doing for you. You have other, like, fish to fry, kind of. And really, if I look back at it, I wanted to, like, live up to the idea of, like, a superwoman. Like, I'm a young woman in a position of power at a very successful agency, very supportive employers. I wanted to do everything so that I could prove to myself that I deserve the chance that I was given. It was absolutely all about me. It was all about me.
And to be fair, she's starting a new position, excited about that new position, energized to kind of do things. And so that can also get out of hand as you just want to keep doing and doing and doing. I've been there. I've been through that. I'm still kind of do that. And, you know, I mean, certainly my reputation in the beginning was, you're bringing in too much, you're doing too much too quickly, you know, and I'm just like, let's do it all. And, you know,
I don't know why you think that reputation has left you, sir.
I know, it's still there.
Yeah. Well, shout out to my grandma. She's just right down she's in the house down over the,
Hi, Grandma.
Okay. And so we do have a comment from Abby. Abby, thank you so much for commenting. She said, especially after a period of time of independence, it's hard to reach out and ask for help again, but it's necessary at times, and it doesn't mean that we aren't capable.
Right.
It's really good.
So, like, again, you know, I had been doing everything on my own. Yeah, yes, Abby, I know. I just came here to have a good time, and I feel personally attacked.
She said, Abby said, that's so you, Janice.
Yeah. So, like, when I started the position and I woke up every day, like, I am the opposite of a morning person, but I'm also not a night owl. I read on Instagram one time, it was like, I'm not a night owl or an early bird. I'm just some form of permanently exhausted pigeon. And
there's a dead pigeon out in front of the building.
Yeah. So at the beginning, when I took the job, I was like popping up out of bed. Like, I couldn't wait for my alarm to go off. I was like, yes, it is 7 a.m. and I am so excited to go do this job.
It was great to really have all that excitement at work.
April's in charge of morale. But like, so I was kind of recreating the position, the way that the position to function, and the way that I wanted to support people and be there for people in ways that were different from the person who had left the position. And so it was just all in, all the time. And then after a while, it's not sustainable to be that all in all the time. You will burn out at some point. And the mistake that I made, that I think a lot of people make, is once you are in that period of independence and you're doing well at it, and you feel like you're managing it well, and you're getting feedback from other people that you're managing it well, is being able to be honest when you hit your burnout point. Everybody hits periods of stuck points in their life. Things seem like they're going really well, and you hit a stuck point. Kind of like quicksand. I thought quicksand was going to be a much bigger deal when I was an adult, the way that I was raised.
And piranhas.
Yeah, the way that I was raised with all like the cartoons and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, quicksand, is everything quicksand? But I think of stuck points as quicksand. And
the more you fight,
the farther you fall. If you ask for help, it's much easier to get out of quicksand, at least according to all of the cartoons I watched in the 90s. And you either decide that you're going to ask for help and be honest, or you activate a denial pattern that slowly starts to eat away at you, create guilt, shame.
Yeah,
like you have two choices. Do I reach out and ask for help, or do I not be honest with myself?
Yeah, that's good. Absolutely.
So I'd be curious, and people want to comment, is what are reasons people don't ask for help? Like, there's probably many. I don't think we've covered all the reasons. So if anybody has any comments they want to put in there about that, I think that would be great.
You can be reporting for a friend as well.
Yes.
You can be sharing for a friend.
I am not speaking for myself. I am speaking for my friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say one of mine reasons for not asking for help, and my girlfriend has helped so much in the last 2 years, but I would say it goes back to attachment theory for me, where I would become avoidant. I would just become distant, and it was because I was afraid of being vulnerable, because whatever with my brain was seeking familiarity, where whenever I was vulnerable when I was little, it wasn't safe.
Well, is that a guy thing?
Well, yeah. No, I think, I suppose it could be, but I think it's a relational history thing. So, I mean, you brought up attachment, but to kind of, if you have relational history issues, like a history of maybe negative relationships or rejection or whatever, that is certainly a very common issue of, I can't ask for help because no one will help me.
Right.
Or I don't want to take the chance of me going, hey, Tyler, can you help me? And you go, no. And then now what? I'm lost. Or I've already had this preconceived design in my head that if I do ask, they're just going to say no. So I've already psyched myself out before I even asked help. There's no point in me asking Janice for help because she'll just say no.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also too, I felt like some of the people that, especially at church, that I wouldn't really ask is because I knew the answer they were going to give me, or it was just advice. It wasn't even people trying to get to know why.
I ask people, it's just not helpful. And
it's not helpful. And then if you were to say, well, thanks, Janice, but that's not helpful, it's like some people don't have the mental space, and they're just like, well, he's just choosing to be this way.
Yes.
Well, I guess he wants to be,
to be unhappy.
unhappy, or as if people want to choose to be unhappy, or
right.
if that's what they want.
Yeah.
But I would say that was one of many reasons why I didn't ask for help.
Yeah.
And again, comment below. Why do you think you or other people don't ask for help? Comment below. We want to know. What about you guys? What's the reason why you wouldn't ask for help?
Mine's probably, so in the beginning, especially I can speak in CEO terms, like when I took that on, is I didn't want to make other people feel overwhelmed. I also had difficulty transitioning from practitioner or doing things that I loved kind of the idea of me being CEO, but there were things that maybe didn't fall technically into CEO land, like training, engaging, like creating programs, doing all those things maybe that I should have let other people do.
Well, and you were still an outsider. You'd only been at the agency for what, a year?
A year and a half.
We hadn't decided if we liked you yet. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
One of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about my outsider in different areas, but I think I certainly also have some workaholic tendencies that I'm sure my wife would support me on, and so sometimes it's been about any of that. It's just I'm going to do it. I want to do it. It's just, I just don't, and so I would say it's like, for me, it was more about not delegating rather than asking for help. Like, not that I necessarily always thought I needed help, but I knew that I shouldn't be doing this. I should be delegating. I should be giving other people opportunities to feel valued and purposeful in the agency, so that, so that's kind of a mixed bag for me.
Yeah.
But,
So like I'm seeing Abby's comment about fear of being judged as a reason for not asking for help. And I would say for me, most of the time, that's why I don't ask. And sometimes I don't ask because I don't know what I need in order to be helped. I think that also is a reason why people sometimes don't ask. But a lot of mine comes back to like ego.
Yeah.
And how asking for help would damage my self-image, my self-esteem. Am I worthy to ask for help? Have I been put in a position where I'm not supposed to ask for help? All kinds of things. But if I'm really honest with myself about it, I don't ask for help because I don't want people to think I'm the kind of person that needs to be helped, as if that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I would also say that there's probably many reasons why I don't ask for help all the time.
Same.
So, like, some of it would be like, well, if I have to ask for help, they're going to think less of me, or they're going to think, am I capable? Like, did we really put the right person in that position?
Like, am I creating doubt in myself?
Am I creating doubt? If I ask, like, for example, like, I've worked with kids all my life. If I ask for help as a parent, like, person who's been in a career like that is asking for help in that, like, that's. Yeah,
and we've talked about that on the food addiction therapy talk.
Right.
Where it's like, well, you're a nutritionist. Shouldn't you eat well? And so, all right, we have Jordan commenting below. So Jordan says, I struggle to ask for help because I tend to feel shame for not being able to handle it. From a friend.
Amen, sister.
Oh, man. From a friend. She texted me, from a friend is supposed to be a joke. Yes, we got
it. Yeah. I mean, shame and guilt, those are two different things, but they often get used interchangeably. In my opinion, they are not the same and they are not interchangeable.
It's not an opinion, it's a definite truth.
Guilt is feeling bad about something that you've done. Shame is feeling bad about who you are. And that's the way that we teach clients. I think that is the simplest way to kind of explain what the difference between those things is. And I think a lot of it is, if shame means that I feel bad about who I am, then I would say if I sit with myself for a second, I feel bad about myself having to ask for help because it doesn't fit the image of like my idealized self-image. So there's a difference between like your actual self-image and your idealized self-image, and where we fail and where we continue to create more and more and more shame is not being honest with ourselves about what our actual realistic limitations are. You've said this to me over and over again. Every time I'm like, hey Doug, I have this great idea. He's like, you need to pump the brakes. Like, there's only so many hours in a week. There's so many minutes in a day. You have got to calm down.
Well, when I get something, it's like, I want to do it now. Like, I'm just so fired up about doing it. I have to,
And I would, asking for help, particularly if you consider yourself to be an independent person, a capable person, a smart person, a worthy person, asking for help can create some shame if you don't have the right like cognitive scaffolding.
Yeah. And I always like making the distinction between shame and guilt, because what people also need to realize about these things is that guilt is actually important to have. The fact, people that don't have guilt are usually psychopaths. Like, they don't care that they hurt other people. Like, you want people to have guilt because then they want to make it right. Like, if you feel bad about what you did,
that means
that's
you have
great.
A conscience.
Like, I love that. Please feel bad about what you did. Now, if you turn on yourself and say, because I did this, I'm such a piece of crap.
Right.
That's where it goes off the rails. It's not what's where. No, but I feel bad. So you know what? I hurt Tyler. So I need to go help. I need to go right. So that's we need guilt. Like, I always tell people, like, emotions, whether you feel they're good or bad, are necessary. So that you can learn. It helps guide your choices.
Yeah.
You know?
And Bethany has commented, this is your sister?
This is my sissy.
Okay. We have, Bethany says, sometimes you know what the answer is going to be and you don't want to hear it yet. So you don't ask because you're not ready to share that. I really resonate with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just not ready to face it.
Right. And I think that happens a lot of times to women in relationships that are not the most healthy, but you are not ready to leave yet. Statistics show that somebody, and not personalizing anything to that comment, just it got my brain moving.
Yeah.
Statistics say that on average, it takes a woman 8 attempts to leave an abusive relationship before she stays away. It's also, interestingly, it is a similar number of tries to stay away from nicotine and tobacco. So when you know that your relationship, when you know that a situation that you're in is not good, but you're not ready to change it yet, you don't want to be that friend that's always complaining about something and always making your friends upset and always, getting your parents riled up about things when you know that you're not ready to change it yet.
Yeah.
And so it creates this like hamster wheel in your head of like, I can't talk about it because I'm not ready to change it. But how do you get ready to change it if you don't have anybody to talk to about it?
Yeah.
It happens a lot to women in relationships because at some point, and I don't know that it's wrong, to have your friends look at you and be like, I simply cannot shoulder the emotional burden of continuing to support you and be there for you.
Yeah.
When you continue to put yourself in a situation that we all know is not healthy, then we all know is not good for you. We are all in agreement about it. And so they don't want to be the drama.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about that is if that's your friend, how would you talk to them? I mean, there probably gets to a point where that has to be said, where it's like, this is just not. And then so when you say that comment, do you then, if she doesn't take that advice, do you remove yourself? Because you said you can't handle the emotional.
I think in the past I would have, but now.
Well, I wouldn't get totally invested in being responsible for the outcome.
Boundaries, like your appropriate boundaries to start with.
Be invested in helping the person, but don't be invested in you have the responsibility of this person creating this outcome, because then now you're putting it all on yourself. Like I didn't do enough, or I didn't, and then now you're feeling guilt for things or shame for things that you have no control over. Those are things that you don't have control over.
The only thing you have control over is the way that you react to things.
And then I would also put out there to the internet world is that, and people can correct me, but if you've ever had that experience where you're trying to convince your friend to think a certain way or do something different, that tends to push them to hold their ground.
Yeah.
Like it tends to push them further back into their bad habit. So like, for example, if you have a friend who's in a domestic violent relationship, you tell them you need to leave, they make excuses and they say, well, no, he's not always like that, or you know, those types of things, and it actually pushes them further into their bad
because
pattern.
you are now in a safe.
Because nobody likes to be forced to be told what to do, or and so I also recommend kind of throw out there is that, like, okay, I'm going to just ask you, what do you want? Where do you want to go with this? You're telling me this. How can we? How can we make better? What are we going to do?
Right.
What do you need me help? What can I help you with?
Right.
In this situation.
Yeah.
And like giving people a list of options, because obviously my job, people assume that I have my life together, which is absolutely incorrect.
Wow.
But when people ask me a question about something, and I've been doing this for years, and my best friend Abby says that it's like the funniest thing about me. When she brings up a situation, she'll be like, and then she'll say, so what do you think? And I'll say, friend, which version of me do you want right now? Do you want me to tell you what I think? Do you want me to answer that question from like my professional lens? Do you just want me to be on the team, and you already know what I think and feel, but like you really just need me to be on the team because you're excited about whatever's happening?
Yeah.
And then whatever they choose is whatever I go with. Okay. Because I can't control you. I can't change you. I can't do anything about you. Only you can do that. So having an appropriate boundary, learning over time through many interpersonal failures, that to remain a safe, healthy person for people, I I can't dive straight into the deep end of other people's problems.
Yeah.
And there is that doesn't mean that I'm uncaring, and it doesn't mean that I'm unfeeling. It just means that I'm able to be more universally supportive to you and do a better job at removing my personal judgment about whatever it is that you're coming and asking for help and support about.
Yeah. Very good. We have another comment from my good friend, Josh. So Josh commented below, I think the worthy she just said is a big deal. Sometimes people feel guilt/shame because they want better for themselves, but their problems aren't as bad as other people, so they feel like they're complaining when other people have it way worse.
Yeah, I think that is very common. I think, like, the tiny violin kind of thing, like, oh, poor you, and you feel like, so not only might you feel this way about yourself, like I should complain, but then you feel like other people think you shouldn't complain. Right? And to be fair, I would say if all you're doing is complaining, it just sounds like you're just being mad at the world and complaining at the world and saying how everybody else is the problem. But when you're talking about, I'm really struggling with this issue, I don't necessarily, like, I would hope people can kind of recognize that that's not complaining, and that they are actually trying to express where they're struggling. But yes, I do think that, there's this kind of, I don't want to look like I'm complaining and
Nobody wants to be a negative Nancy.
Making it about me.
Right. Oh, yes.
That type of thing.
Yeah, and like to...
especially if you're in a relationship or in a situation where other people are having problems too. We're all kind of like, I don't want, because I know, so and so's really struggling, so I don't want to like.
Right, and let's kind of take Josh's comment and just rope it back into what we were saying in response to Bethany's. Millions of people are in mentally, sexually, financially, spiritually abusive relationships, but they don't leave because it's not that bad, because they haven't hit me, or they haven't broke my jaw, or they haven't put me in the hospital. Like there's always something worse to come. And that check-in with yourself, and then we're on the other side of it where I don't know that asking for help. I saw a comment in there at one point about finding the right fit with a therapist. So if we take it like from a clinical perspective and we think about the worthiness of engaging in treatment, it doesn't matter that you've never been in the psychiatric hospital before. Like there is no line where you shouldn't at least ask for the consultation from a professional. You may come in and we may be like, you're actually doing a pretty dang good job with your own resources, with your own, ways of coping. You're doing a pretty good job. You're absolutely here if you want to keep coming in and keep talking. It's my job to save space for you, hold space for you. You're actually doing pretty okay. Just because you come in, it's not like you've wasted time. There is nobody who is, I say all the time, like at major life turning points, it's probably a good idea to go talk it out with an unbiased party. Well, like
Lily had mentioned, she commented and said fear of not finding the right fit with a therapist. And I feel like part of whenever I was going to a guy named James for about a month and a half, and I kind of kept going back and forth. Like some sessions were good and some weren't. I mean, there was one just where he was like, there's a Bible verse, and he sat there for like 5 minutes looking through the Bible trying to find a verse, and I'm like, I'm in anxiety. Like last year the beginning of the year was bad. And I was like, what are you doing right now? Like email me the Bible verse. Like, and then there was one time where he was talking to me for like 15 minutes straight. And I just had so much anxiety because I was like, I'm not getting any help. Just a bunch of adrenaline coming up in me. So it took me fear of not having the right fit. I always tell people, if you don't have the right fit with a therapist, like feel free to go to someone else but my fear was I'm going to lose a month and a half of progress that I made with that therapist. Then when I went to Cynthia, my current therapist, I got more done in one session with her than I did with James. And I was like, so glad that I moved on to find a better fit.
And to be fair about that as well, like, he obviously has had experiences doing therapy the way he does therapy that gives him information that says he's doing a good job.
Yeah.
But there's going to be people he's going to come across that are not going to respond well to that. You know, he wouldn't keep doing the same thing if every single person came to him and said, you don't do a good job, you know? And so I think we just sometimes don't fit. So
right.
You know, for you who was feeling anxious in that moment, someone else might've thought, you know, he's really trying hard to find this verse for me so that he can help me. And it, you know, it just depends on how we relate and connect with what that person, you know, is doing. And I think, you know, you just have to communicate. And so I always want people to kind of think that, okay, number one, there's a lot of therapists out there. Like we have a lot that we don't just have one therapist in the county. We have multiple therapists.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if one doesn't work, doesn't mean that all are bad.
Right.
Yeah.
We are all so different. Like our styles of counseling, like just between the two of us, could be considered the opposite of one spectrum. The way that we provide service, and kind of combining Kaylee's comment and Josh's comment, it's not just the patient that has anxiety when there's a new therapeutic relationship that needs to be formed. I think it's also important to kind of bring out into the light, like as professional helpers, we also have anxiety and fear about, am I going to do the right thing for you? Am I good enough to offer you feedback about the thing that you are coming to me? Am I good enough for this? Am I competent for this? Like, yes, I have a master's degree. Yes, I passed the test. Like, who am I? Because lots of times therapists are some of the most messed up people in the world. We just read a lot of books. But like, there is still that sense on all sides of the fence when you start a therapeutic relationship. There is anxiety on both sides. We are afraid that we aren't going to be good enough for you, and you are afraid that you may not be good enough to ask for my help. That is a two-way street. It is not just a one-way street. We are not sitting over here thinking that we have the answers to everything. We've been talking about a case for probably about a month that just round and round, and we can't figure out the answer. But that doesn't mean that we aren't trying our hardest. It doesn't mean that we aren't good enough to help this client. It's just we have not found the resolution yet. We haven't found the right solution for this particular client yet. But we're not going to give up. Be like, well, we tried everything we knew to do, so I guess now we're done and we're just not a good fit. You need to go find another therapist. No, the relationship should push both sides to get better.
Doug, before we get into the topic at hand tonight, I've never asked you guys this question, and what is, you both are therapists, how are your two styles different? What do you feel comfortable with? Because I know that one thing I love about my therapist is she listens to me. I feel like I can't get information, I can't take advice unless you know where I'm coming from, because then my brain finds ways to say how what you're saying isn't what I'm going through. And so I'm curious, what are your two different styles in doing therapy?
Do you want to start?
No,
I don't even know if there even is styles, but I know.
Oh, there absolutely are styles.
Because Cynthia, is it Carl Rogers? She said that she.
Oh yeah.
She likes him.
Rogerian theory.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think.
Do you want to play a game where you describe my therapeutic style from your perspective, and then I do the opposite?
I don't even know if I have the words to describe it.
That's because they're all curse words, and we can't say them on YouTube.
That would be a good start, but no. No, well, first of all, I think I think Janice has found that her style meshes really well with the population that she primarily works with. So the things that give her anxiety about seeing in treatment, I gravitate towards, and the things that she feels comfortable with, I tend to have more anxiety about, or I don't feel as competent or as comfortable with that. Not that I've never worked in with the clients that she works with in terms of people in recovery and addiction and stuff like that. Just that's not, or I would take it from a different slant or angle.
Yeah.
And that is more of, because I think that has a lot to do with just my upbringing in terms of my adult upbringing, my career upbringing, and training and stuff like that. But I also think her personality just in kind of can match really well with the rhythm and style that, people in recovery, at least adults in recovery, respond well to and find helpful, especially for someone, who you've openly said, you don't have, lived experience in that area. You're still able to live in that world and help them and find success. Whereas I don't know, it would be a little bit harder for me. Not that I think I could build relationships and connect, but they might still kind of keep me.
Well, I'm trying to follow. So for me, when you say that, is her approach more like she listens and then it's more like, okay, sweetheart, like,
no, so here's the difference. When somebody shares something with me, if they share like a trauma, something that's upsetting to them, something that like brings them pain, all of them be like, man, that thing sucks. Like that would be the way that I would respond to that. Doug would respond to it with a very good therapist question.
What would that be?
That's based in like
or a reflection, not necessarily it was a question.
Doug is much more of like a therapist, where I'm just like, what's up? I have the letters after my name to provide you the service, but it's gonna feel just like a normal conversation. Yeah. You're gonna walk away and somebody's gonna be like, you talk about in therapy? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? We saw James today, right? Oh yeah, so we talked about X, Y, and Z. Like mine, and I think maybe like the most like instinctive difference is that you are much more comfortable with the power differential that exists in a therapeutic relationship, I think.
Okay, explain.
So being a young white woman who does not have a history of addiction myself, trying to work with addicts, I could not approach anyone from a position of, I understand, no, I'm knowledgeable. I need to approach every single client relationship with, I don't know anything. Teach me about yourself.
Yeah, I would almost say that I don't know if it that we'd necessarily do things differently. We'd have a different flavor to it, a different like
because we're different people.
Because I think we're both curious.
Yeah.
Like I like for me as a therapist, I'm respectfully curious to the clients that are in my room. I want to know more about where they're coming from. I want to understand as best I can. I want to be a witness to their experience. I think Janice does the same thing. It's just the personality and style and just, I don't know. I think I've cussed before in therapy, but she probably cusses more in therapy. But I've certainly cussed. But for me, it usually shocks people if I cuss, so they don't expect it from me. So if I like throw up a cuss word in session, or I reflect back the cuss word that they say, they're like, especially when I was working with kids, like the adult therapist is cussing back. So I don't. Because my approach, and I think her approach is similar in the fact that we're very relationship-based therapists. Our priority is relationship. It's feeling safe, connection, and that involves a lot of listening and stuff like that. I probably am a little bit more. I don't know. I just think it's hard for me to kind of put words to it.
Well,
but I think we both are going for the same.
Yeah.
But like the thing,
focus.
like we're both respectfully curious, but when somebody presents something, and if we are both listening to the same story from somebody,
we definitely might jump on different things.
The things that he is respectfully curious about are different than the things that I am curious about.
That's where I want to keep going with this, is I am curious. So when you say, man, like, not that you don't say this, but like, when, man, that really sucks. And then you say he's a therapist, like that comment, how, can you give me an example? What would you be curious about by someone telling you similarly that they're really struggling? Are you, empathize?
So oftentimes I will just reflect. I find reflecting gets a better result than asking a question, but I would say that must have been really hard for you, or man, you must have been really angry or upset or something along those lines. Sometimes it'll get me curious about a specific question. So what is it about this situation that was so upsetting, or what got you so fired up? And, and sometimes I need more information. Like when did this happen? Who are you with? Or what was this, So those are types of things. 'Cause really what I'm trying to understand is what is, so for example, things are going to trigger us differently. So why is this situation triggering you? So you could put two people in the same situation, and one's getting really irate about it, and the other one's not. Well, why is that?
Yeah.
What is that situation tapping into that makes it so hard for this person to deal with? So then I can get to that piece, and let's try to resolve that.
Okay.
Let's try to make sense of that and work through that.
Our different therapeutic styles are, in my mind, a direct result of the populations that we, what does NMT call it? It's like the relational, like they're just like more relationally compatible from like the beginning. There's a term for it. I've heard you say it a million times. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. But like the rhythm of the relationship. Yeah. So the rhythm of the relationship, like it traumatized children, Doug's jam. IV heroin addicts, my jam. And those are very different presentations of human beings.
Yeah.
And they need very different things from the people that they are working with. And so because of that, our styles are very different because we are used to serving a client population. Like sometimes I can't even use the word heroin in my session because it's too clinical for people because they call it dope or fire or whatever else that the streets are calling it these days. So I have to use, my language has to reflect and create safety in that space because what my clients are doing is so taboo and so illegal that they have to feel that I'm not judging them. They have to feel.
Oh, yeah.
Lime Grover just said this Monday, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
For the first period of sessions is just making sure you understand that I unconditionally love you.
Yeah.
There are expectations to get 110% back out of me on the other side, but I unconditionally love you. I have unconditional positive regard for you as a person, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, and sometimes you just, like, I don't think it's also as black and white. There are some people that I've connected with in therapy that I would have never guessed.
Right.
And there are some people that wanted to change therapists.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like,
Right.
I don't really understand why, but okay, you know, that's your preference. So so I am not, just like, I think going back to what your comment was like on the therapist having anxiety, it's like, I don't really know how it's going to go just as much as the therapist or the client doesn't know how it's going to go in that first session. Like, I don't know if you're going to jive with me or not. And, I'm hopeful. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but that doesn't mean that I connect well with everybody.
Right.
And some people it's easy, and then people it's just not working. And I've had those experiences, and so we have to take care of ourselves and go, it's not about me. Like, they're just we're not, we just don't jive. And I will find the person. I'll find somebody else for you, so that you find the person. But
yeah. Very good. Well, that was interesting. I didn't even think we'd talk about that, but I've never even thought to ask you guys your different styles. And
good start with a quote.
Yeah, that's I think that might even be something good.
Yeah, for sure.
Later on the Resilient Purpose podcast to do a segment on is different styles or you two talking to each other. I think that'd be really interesting. All right, so let's get to it. Janice has been researching and learning and reading and watching and everything. And so I'm just going to kind of set it up and then you can go with it.
All right,
so
tee me up, coach.
The topic that we are talking about this evening is called Undue Influence. So I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to read this. I got this from Google. So Undue Influence, a person is induced to act otherwise than by their own free will or without adequate attention to the consequences. So Janice,
I have a question.
No.
Is there somebody at Google that defined that? Or did Google find it somewhere else?
I hope Google found it somewhere else.
Okay. Like, hopefully Google found it.
Yeah,
Google probably wrote. Oh, it's like a dictionary thing.
Okay. What is
it's from the Oxford Dictionary.
Okay, so Oxford defined.
Oxford Dictionary.
Oxford,
Interesting.
I'm sure Google has a much
Where did Oxford
better
get it?
working definition of undue
No, wait, it
influence.
says it's from Scientology.com. That's where it's
Shut
coming
up.
from.
That's not their actual website either. Let's see where to start. I'm obsessed with cults. That's where we can start at. And
who isn't?
I can't understand why you wouldn't be. And I think the first time I really was affected by information about cults was watching Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath.
Yeah.
I watched it live when it was premiering. I've watched all of the seasons on Netflix. I don't know how many times. And listening to them share the structure of this church and some of their practices and some of the things that they were allowed to do were absolutely mind-blowing to me. I am a baptized, though not particularly good Catholic. And so these stark differences between
so
the
by
church
calling yourself a not Catholic, does that play any role into the undue influence?
I don't know. We'll ask my mom later. So, I think, yeah, maybe. So, maybe. So my brain just started putting things together. So, the Church of Scientology and the way that they operate is very much hot take. I don't think the Church of Scientology is an actual church. I think it's a business. I think that when you are paying for services and receiving services, that is a service, not a religion. As a baptized, but not particularly good Catholic, I can go to church whenever I want. I can leave whenever I want. I can go to confession whenever I want. I cannot go to confession whenever I want. And there is no pressure that I have felt. I'm sure other people have different experiences. But I don't feel insane pressure from my church if I'm not absolutely meeting every standard they set out. My mother was not asked to not have a relationship with me anymore when I was not going to church regularly, which disconnection is a published policy of L. Ron Hubbard's. They try to say that it doesn't exist, but it exists. And so Scientology is really where I got interested in cults. And I think that was the first time I understood I could see step by step how somebody would find themselves in a cult, find themselves stuck in a cult. And so then I absolutely could not get enough. And I mean, everything. I've watched, the Heaven's Gate documentary on HBO Go. I've watched the NXIVM documentary on HBO Go, everything and anything. Moonies, all of it, because it just became clear to me people that end up in cults are very smart people, but we have this idea that people who end up in cults are just mindless drones that will just believe anything that somebody tells them. Often it's highly educated people that end up in cults, but cults get this bad name, this bad rap, because of things like the Branch Davidians and Waco and Jonestown. There are many forms of cults that exist. And I started reading this book by Steve Hassan, now a doctor. He got his PhD. He was a Moonie in the 70s and got out on the other side, didn't like the way that he would be programmed from his cult, and so he started researching. And he wrote this.
Didn't like how he was deprogrammed from the cult?
Yes, he did. He thought that there was a similar amount of undue influence in the deprogramming just as there was in his indoctrination into the Moonies. So
is this him?
Yes, that's him.
Okay.
This one, Combating Cult Mind Control, is the first book that he wrote that I'm currently working my way through. He has many excellent YouTube videos if you are interested. And as I'm reading this book, I'm just thinking to myself, everyday relationships have this common golden thread of undue influence in them. The idea, and I was explaining to Tyler once when he was like, so what makes a cult? I said, well, Stephen Hassan says that it's a cult, you are under undue influence when your personal identity, your personal values are subverted so that you can prioritize identification with the organization. So, for example, in Scientology, let's go with disconnection, the policy of disconnection. If my mom and I were Scientologists instead of Catholics, and I said I don't want to go anymore, I don't want to do that anymore, but that was it. Just, I don't want to do it anymore. My mom would have had to make a choice to subvert her personal desire to have a relationship with her daughter and choose to identify with the organization over her personal values. That is a really extreme example of undue influence. I see undue influence all over the place. I think
I was watching a YouTube about how when he left Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's another thing.
Jehovah's Witnesses is another one that has a disconnection policy similar. When I look at it, and as I'm reading this book and as I'm watching all of these things, these are just abusive relationships on massive scale. It's not just one abuser and one person being mistreated. It's a leader who has created a framework where people volunteer to be mistreated. And because you volunteer, so this was a big thing in NXIVM. India, I'm not gonna get her last name right. India Eisenberg.
Man, I can't get over people volunteer to be mistreated.
So, and this is why NXIVM and Keith Raniere not only getting arrested, but prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced the way that he was. That doesn't happen particularly often. I think this is the first time it's happened because every law enforcement officer is like, well, she's an adult. She's there by herself, Catherine. We can't go take your daughter away. You say it's bad. She's over the age of 18. She made a choice to live there. She made a choice to stay there. She's making a choice. She's an adult. But what's important to recognize is that in the NXIVM, Keith Raniere, Allison Mack situation, the courts recognized and had the ability to prove the use of undue influence on people's choice to stay there. So they were charged with sex trafficking, with human trafficking, all sorts of things, because it was recognized that these people really didn't have a choice.
Well, because you're talking about volunteering, but they're not volunteering to something that they consciously know is not good for them. They believe that what they are volunteering for is best for them.
Yeah.
And almost like, I'm going to continue drinking even though people are telling me that it's bad for me. I don't think so. I think it's not a big deal, or it's good for me, or whatever. And so the same kind of thinking patterns and beliefs and things like that, I think play out in that coercive, undue influence kind of piece. So that's also, I think, cults. I think I was just watching a TV show episode about cults, and that was the whole thing. You know, she's 18 years old. She has the right to be where she wants to be, and she says she's not coming out.
And I think the thing that puts so much stigma around cults, people who find themselves cults and people who leave cults, the reason I think that there's so much stigma and alienation about the topic is because as people who are not involved in that, we look at the end of whatever that situation was that they volunteered to be. We are only seeing the end. We are only seeing when all of their human will has been subverted. We are only seeing the end of massive, masterful manipulation. But sometimes these things, so NXIVM, for example, and Scientology, actually, they both start out as self-help workshops. They both start out as, are you having problems in your relationship? Are you having problems at work? Do you want to do... NXIVM is an offshoot of ESP, which is the Executive Success Program. And Keith Raniere also had a very successful, but later to be determined Ponzi scheme in the 90s called Consumer Credit Line. He literally did the exact same thing with ESP and NXIVM. It just got much worse and much darker, the things that he was trying to do and the things he was trying to bring to himself once that happened. So you start out with good intentions. Yeah, here's this workshop. Sounds like it'd be pretty cool. Maybe, we'll send the kids off to grandma's for a weekend. Right. Janie and I are going to go. We're going to learn about this. We're going to improve our communication. And you go, and it actually works. many people are like, yeah, the beginning workshop levels of these things are actually very effective. They are very effective and they are very useful. But then it's, okay, so you did a 1-day workshop. So now let's do a 3-day, and then let's do a 5-day, and let's do a 7-day, then let's do a 21-day. These things all cost an extreme amount of money. So whether you are wealthy or not, you begin to believe in kind of the snake oil that's being sold to you as a solution. And as you see it start to work, you just kind of fall further and further and further and further into it. And at a certain point, this becomes the way that you look at the world. And if you are looking at the world through a lens of executive success program, and let's also point out that what I find particularly disturbing about NXIVM, and I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but neuro-linguistic programming, the president of NXIVM ESP, right under Keith Raniere, she was a master in NLP. The entire program was based on NLP and neuro-linguistic programming. For people who don't know, neuro-linguistic programming is kind of like, it's kind of like hypnosis, but it's not hypnosis. Puts you in a meditative kind of state, wherein you then become more suggestible.
Right, and you're typically trying to work with like traumatic memories and distance yourself from those memories. I mean, there's a lot of, processes that are not very far off. One of the things that I'm hearing, or that is standing out to me, is it's when things get to extremes. So you have like the ideas of where it starts, it becomes extreme. Now the extreme is that if you don't, anytime you come up and challenge any of these ideas, then that's where the undue influence, I think, in the coercion starts to really play out.
Yes.
Like if you're going to challenge these ideals or concepts that I'm displaying, then you're going to have to be disconnected or whatever from the, there's this relational coercion, emotional coercion, all these different things to kind of really tap into how am I going to get you back in this thing. And so it's very similar. Hi, Cecily.
Hi, Cecily.
It's very similar to, I think
if you look at any abusive relationship, any one-on-one dyadic abusive relationship, and the many steps and phases that relationship goes through, to then, a woman is actively getting beat, or a man is actively getting physically abused regularly, and they don't leave. All of the stages up to that are the same. The cycle of abuse is exactly the same. They use love bombing. When you try to bring something up and you try to leave, Stephen Hassan talks about combating mind control, where he talks about the first weekend that he went away with the Moonies. He didn't realize they were the Moonies, but he went away with them. And the second day he was like, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I thought it would be. I want to go back to New York. I have things to do this weekend. I want to go back. And then they surrounded him with this love bombing. This like, oh, you're so great. You're going to get so much out of this. We're so happy to have you. I can't believe you're here. We've been waiting for you to come. We've been talking. Like, there's just all this love bombing. Regularly used term when we're talking about cults. And it's the same thing as, after an abuser hits you, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I love you so much, I can't believe I did that, here's your flowers, here's your favorite dinner. It's exactly the same. And then behaviors start to ramp up again, and then there's a violation of your personal boundaries, and then your abuser provides you with some positive recourse that continues you in this hamster wheel of the situation that you find yourself in. And at a certain point, very successful cults, typically related to religion, spirituality, they oftentimes are addressing issues like what happens to us after we die, issues like that, things that people have a lot of fear about, things that people feel very connected to. No one knows the answer to those questions, right? So if you find something that you're like, yeah, I can get on board with this, it's very enticing. I mean, for organized religion that has answers to those questions. But the thing that makes successful cults different to me is the isolation factor that happens. Just like a typical abusive relationship, the abuser wants you away from everyone that can point out that what is going on is wrong. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so disconnection policies, putting pressure on you that you can't, in NXIVM, to be like, to be doing all that you could to be furthering yourself on this like path of betterment. You couldn't live where you wanted to live. You had to move to Albany, New York, in this row of townhomes where Keith Raniere like held court and made you go watch him play volleyball at midnight. Like you have strange. It really is, because he wasn't even really that good at it, just from outsider's perspective. But he was able to hold court, you know, be the center of attention. He wasn't even like lecturing anybody about anything. He was literally playing volleyball. But again, I'm going to say that I'm important. You are now away from everybody else that's going to tell you that like that's silly to go watch a 45-year-old man play volleyball for what? You are only surrounded by people who are like, yeah, we got to go, because what if he's going to talk to us? What if he's going to talk to us?
It becomes mystical and mythical and everything like that. But I also think that their marketing scheme is, are you like really relationally well connected? Do you have like strong ideals and values? Then you belong to us. No, they say, you know, they're tapping into people that are struggling. They're tapping into people that are vulnerable. And so the more vulnerable you are, the more, you know, the more susceptible you'll be to that undue influence. They're able to recruit in terms of finding people that need to have a sense of belonging somewhere. Very similar to gang life. Gangs don't recruit people that are very well connected within their own family and friends. They find people that are rejected and isolated and alone and vulnerable to join gangs, or because gangs wouldn't have the power and lure unless there was there's people that have relational poverty. And so same thing with you know, people that are, you know, organizing cults, is you're not tapping the relational healthy. You're tapping the relationally unhealthy. You're tapping people with relational poverty, with or people that are lost, or you know, on these. And
that's definitely a portion of the people that end up in cults. The other side of people who end up in cults, and I think people don't understand this particular. If you have the ability to be cognitively flexible, you are vulnerable to being a part of a cult. If you can allow your mind to not stay in that black and white space, and if you can allow yourself to be open-minded to very different ways of looking about life and thinking about things, you are vulnerable to belonging to a cult. You may have maybe not the best relationships, but you may not be disconnected. You may not be lost. You may not be that floating island of a person. You may have people that are desperately trying to keep you away from it, but you are cognitively flexible enough. And you identify with whatever's being shared by the guru or the whatever they want to call themselves. Do you know what I mean? And it's like being open-minded is something that's good to do in culture, something that's good to be in society. It's good to be open-minded. So being open-minded and being cognitively flexible also leaves you vulnerable. So it's not just a land of misfit people that don't have anywhere to be or anybody that loves them. A lot of them have people that very much love them, very much care about them. They have decent jobs, but they give it all up for this leader and the set of ideas
this mission
that the leader has put forward, because they were cognitively flexible to make space in their head to like, well, what if this is true? And then they just keep going. They just keep going, keep going.
Yeah, well, another thing too that I read recently is one tactic of a person like that uses speech or is talking on a stage to manipulate people is us versus them. Create a common enemy, and you preach against that enemy, and then it gets people to get on your side.
Which is I think another way to isolate people. We are the only people that you can trust.
I don't even know if it's a term, but I call it like scapegoating preaching, where it's like you just blame everything on things, just put it on that. Then it's like, then you get a very simplistic answer to that problem. And then everyone goes, you know what? He's right. That's true. Yeah, we do need that.
Yeah.
And it gets people riled up, and it gets people on a common mission.
The other ideal that exists, particularly in Nexian Scientology, that I find really disturbing and upsetting as a mental health professional, is the idea that everything that happens to you is your fault, to an extreme. If you are abused, it's because you've done something to deserve that.
Yes.
Not that you've done something that allowed for chaos to exist. No. You deserved to have that bad thing happen to you. And so there are so many stories from Scientology of children abused, and the message that they get as children, because L. Ron Hubbard said that children are just thetans in small bodies. So children are adults. It doesn't matter what size their body is. A thetan is a thetan.
So they're accountable just as much as an adult is.
They had to follow all of the same rules as adults in Scientology. And so when a child is abused by an abuser, that the Church of Scientology protects, by the way, it's the child's fault. It's the child's fault that they were, because L. Ron Hubbard says that everything that happens to you is your fault. And if something bad happens to you, it's because you have crimes. They call them crimes, which in like Christianity, sins. They have crimes that they haven't been honest about, that haven't come out and they're auditing yet. And so with unresolved crimes, bad things happen to you because you deserve it.
Now I want to stop right there for a minute, because this has popped in my mind, because this translates so much, even in Christianity, even in certain types of theology. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Doug, but the law of attraction.
Yeah.
If you can think more positively, if you can think extremes, if you can do these things, then you will be a magnet, and it'll come back to you tenfold. It'll come, like you see this in prosperity preaching too.
Yeah.
So is that kind of the same thing that you're talking about, as far as
they take the concept and they twist it and make it a very sinister, very dark, like pillar of belief. Positive psychology is a whole realm of psychology and intervention that basically is saying like, if you are thinking positively, you will attract positive things. If you are approaching the world with a positive outlook, you will interpret the world more positively. And there's research that's been done to back that up. I think there are similar concepts that organizations choose to take advantage of and twist to fit their particular narrative. And that's, I think, maybe on some level, part of what upsets me so much about cults and why I'm so interested in them, is because it basically takes some of like the very most important tenets of the work that we do in counseling, psychology, social work, related fields, and twists them to become a trap. A trap that people cannot get out of. And I think maybe that is part of what upsets me, because I watch these things and I'm just like, how dare you? Like Nancy, Keith Raniere's number 2, she studied under the person that created NLP. Like the person who created NLP taught her how to do NLP. And she took this potentially very helpful, useful clinical tool and twisted it to get people to subvert their own will to enter into voluntary sex trafficking. It's so gross to me as a professional when people do those sorts of things on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It was on purpose.
Right. Well, yeah. And how we interpret things and how we, communicate what these things mean and different perspectives, you certainly can take something that, and so those things become bad, rather, like the objects of it, not the people that are misusing it or mistreating it. Same thing happens, if there's a negative experience with the preacher, it's not the Bible's fault. It's the person who's interpreting it in an inappropriate way. That really is the issue, because, all the that religion, those things but how we interpret it and what does that mean for the way we treat people and what we expect out of people and how they live their lives. And
reminds me of scammers too. Like scammers are using technology that is updated, phone calls, texting, emails. They're using things that other people have invented in order to scam people.
Right.
People that are manipulative and seeking power are using psychology, using things that other people have researched.
And so the other thing is, and that reminds me of an interesting point I read. I think it was in Stephen Hassan's book. Technology is rapidly evolving. But the technology of our brain, the technology of the way that the human body works, isn't evolving at the speed of technology.
Yeah, we're not designed for this world.
No. And so we can get pounded with messages over and over. Maybe it was The Social Dilemma, talking about algorithms.
I need to watch that. A lot of people that
you haven't watched that yet?
I need to watch it.
Now, immediately.
I get kind of the concept of it, but I need to watch it.
So, have you watched it?
No.
Oh.
You guys.
We're too busy. I mean, Mandalorian was out, and we're waiting for Boba Fett and the new Obi-Wan. I mean, we don't have time.
I'm too busy falling to the dark side of the Force. No, let's just talk about a course of.
Yeah,
we're not keeping up with the Kardashians. We're keeping up with.
I am keeping up with the Kardashians this season because it's the last one, so I know it's going to be good. But the idea that it's not that hard to hack someone's brain. It is not that hard to hack someone's psychology, to take basic psychology 101 and hack somebody's way of thinking and subvert it and change it to a way that suits you. It is really not hard to do that. It's really not.
Well, when you say that too, there was one where we had a podcast with Jackson and Jeff that were on, and after the podcast, you guys were talking to them, and they were talking about how down in Marietta, the homeless were staying in the park, and then the police were like, kicking them out, and then really the law was you guys can stay here, but you got to leave in the morning. But it's like them knowing their rights. A lot of people don't know their rights, so even in psychology, like people need to know, no, this is abusive. Like you do have rights, and people don't know those. So what would be some rights that you would think of if someone's trying to manipulate you?
Well, I mean, everybody has the right to autonomy. It's one of my least favorite, but most important, like ethical considerations about the way I do my job. Everybody has the right to make their own choices, no matter what I think of them. Regularly happening in cults, when you bring up something, if you ask somebody like, hey, like, I don't really know that I agree with this thing. I don't really know that it's like, well, you're not doing it right. You don't understand. You're not open enough. You're not spiritual enough. You're not, there's blame put back on the person because there is no explanation that makes logical sense.
Yeah. So you keep trying to find it, and then when you go back to them, then they say, well, that's not what I said, or you're not hearing it right, or that's so frustrating.
It's worse than that.
Yeah.
It is a personal, purposeful shame game. You don't get it because you aren't smart enough. You don't get it because you're not open-minded enough. You don't get it because there's a block. You have a crime. There is something wrong with you. That is why you don't understand our perverted way of thinking, our twisted way of thinking. All the time in cults this happens. So you're punished for asking questions, emotionally, sometimes physically. Scientology had a fun little jail.
Well, if you also look at, I mean, you're talking, one of the tricks of the trade is creating a chaotic, stressful environment. So, like for the Branch Davidian kids, there's moments of love and caring, but then there's moments of abuse and craziness. And
you guys are hitting too many pressure points with me right now. Just keep going.
but it's the more unpredictable you can make this experience, the more susceptible and vulnerable you are to staying in that environment.
They create dependency.
Right. You create a dependency because much like in the domestic violence cycle, you're waiting for that moment of getting flowers and getting the love and everything like that. So you'll endure the physical assaults to get to the love.
Yeah. And in the
because
meantime,
this pattern has been ingrained in your nervous system to where you start kind of reacting to this, and it becomes living in this chaos becomes familiar to the brain. So anything that's less than that is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so people have trouble thinking differently because thinking differently is not something that they're comfortable with.
Well, and the people who get stuck in these situations from any point to when they make a decision to leave, you are leaving everything you know.
Yeah.
If you are in Scientology, you can be a part of the Sea Org, which is like essentially like in terms of Christianity, you'd be like living at the Vatican kind of type thing. Like everything's taken care of for you.
Is that the big building that you see in pictures?
There's many different Sea Orgs, but in the Sea Orgs, that's all you do. From the time that you're a child, you do not go to school. You do not go to school.
Man.
You go to Scientology school. Scientology school is literally just like 14 hours a day of like labor. And then learning L. Ron Hubbard, learning about his writings and his teachings. So all of your living needs to have been taken care of. You make like $15 a week or something crazy low. And then if you decide to leave, you literally have nothing. You have nothing. Scientology makes you sign a billion-year contract when you go into the Sea Org. You have nothing. You have no one. You have nothing. You have no life skills. No one's taught you how to do anything. And so the dependency and the real, like, I hate to say it, but like L. Ron Hubbard was kind of a genius the way that he wrote this. He also, interesting, is the most publicized writer of fiction ever. He wrote more words, pages, lines, books of fiction.
How old was he when he died?
He was 80 some when he died. He died of a stroke. Even though Scientology is supposed to cure all body
they
illness.
probably have an explanation for why.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He made a purposeful decision, Tyler, to rid himself of his body because his next plane of research, he couldn't accomplish that.
Well, there's also
with his fate and body.
There's also someone's wife that's missing.
That's Shelley Miscavige.
Okay,
we're not allowed to talk about her. The Remini got in trouble for that.
Yeah,
you're not allowed to ask where a person is. They filed a missing persons report.
Can't find her, and But what I wanted to respond
to. Are we allowed to ask where she's at?
Hey, David Miscavige, where's your wife?
Yeah. Well, something that I read up on too, Doug, that you were talking about, you become familiar with that is narcissists do what's called breadcrumbing, where almost like a duck where you put bread down, and then it's like when the duck starts to stray off, you give a little breadcrumb and the duck comes back, and it's like you learn to live on breadcrumbs.
Yes.
You learn to live, like you're satisfied with, oh my gosh, they did something for me. They did something nice. They couldn't abuse me because they went out and did this thing for me.
Even then, the abuse is tolerated. Even if you recognize and accept the abuse, it's tolerated and acceptable because you get that little breadcrumb of positive reinforcement from
Did you ever watch Big Bang Theory?
Yeah. Oh, I love.
So there was the episode where Sheldon's trying to train Penny, and he's giving her the M&Ms.
Yeah, he's conditioning her.
Conditioning her. I mean, it's the operant and conditioning approach, right?
Yeah.
You deprive somebody of something, and then you bring them back through reward.
And I think it's hard because sometimes, like for people, they're like you said, when they're in that, where's the baseline? Well,
they don't know what the baseline is.
They sent me a text. They said, "Hey, I hope you're having a great weekend. I hope you're."
What I think is the efforts of those situations are conditioning, and I think that's true in a lot of typical organizations like that. We're conditioning you to live this type of lifestyle. Like where a difference would be like our approach is to build skills so that you can live the life that you want to live, right? So in situations, I am putting all these things in place that play on our fears, play on our need for connection, all these different things.
Desire for self-improvement is a huge one.
And so it is not skill building, it is conditioning you to be a part of something that they want you to be a part of for their own personal gain.
Yeah. NXIVM had this like beautiful example of that thing that you're talking about. They called them readiness drills. So once you were in a certain subset, even NXIVM, you were assigned a master and you were that person's slave. This is what they got indicted and Keith Raniere he's in jail for. In the readiness drills, you had 1 minute. You had 1 minute from receiving a text message from your master to respond. You had to take a picture and request from your master permission to eat every single calorie that went into your body. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you were not allowed to make your own decisions about anything. And you were in a constant state of hypervigilance, because if you didn't respond to the readiness drill appropriately, everybody in your slave hierarchy was going to get punished.
So the other thing is so this is what makes us very susceptible, is we grow up in a society of compliance. And we were talking about this in one of our other live streams about obedience and compliance. And I just want my kids to just do what I say.
Yeah.
That's the drawback is that we're training them to be obedient, never question situations where
there is an authority figure.
Where it's going to be, so they put themselves as an authority figure. And so I'm taught never to question an authority figure, regardless of how unhealthy or harmful it is. I am not allowed to do that. And so you become, if you find yourself as a very obedient child,
yes,
and you go into a world where you have needs, and an authority figure enters into this setting and starts creating these situations, then I'm being obedient to, because I can't defy these things, regardless if there's any kernel in my mind that's going, that doesn't sound right. I don't know if I agree with that.
But the authority figure
said so I got to do it.
And the other thing that I find, again, extremely disturbing about most of these cults, like we've been talking about, they have very charismatic, very smart figureheads. Jim Jones, David Koresh. I don't understand what people saw in Keith Raniere, but Keith Raniere.
I just can't imagine, though. Do you think
Ron
some
Hubbard.
of these people genuinely think that they're hearing from God? Like some of these people where it's like
there's some psychosis and
it's just
delusional.
And even if it doesn't go,
and the means justify the
Yeah.
ends. If someone gets abused, hey, listen, that's the means justify the ends. The ends is going to justify that.
Scientology has an approach to decision making that they teach to you, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the best decision for the greatest good. And so if what that means is, as a parent, you are neglectful of your children because you're spending 10 hours a day in a Scientology center learning Scientology because you have to work full time, and so you can't be there during the week, so you spend all of your time on the weekends. In a Scientology center, it doesn't matter that you're hurting your child, because that's only one sphere of influence.
Yeah.
You are making a decision for the greatest good by studying Scientology so that you can clear the planet, so that everybody can be saved. Like it just the when you said that, it made me think, like they teach you how to think. They teach you how to make decisions, and the way that they teach you how to do that is to not care about the way that your decisions impact the people around you, because there is a promise that you are doing something so amazing for this huge magnitude of people.
Well, even that brings me, and Doug's the one that's kind of brought it. It's been very helpful for me to think of extremes. And I feel like Scientology and these things that you're mentioning are very extremes. Everything that you're saying I'm relating with, and there are churches that are doing those types of things where it's, well, you're neglecting your family, but people are going to experience Jesus because you're doing that. Like all this greater good, like neglectful, like all these things. So I see Scientology, like when we listen to Janice, as these are extremes, and people go, "Oh, it's crazy," but then but I think why some people don't
think
see
it starts that way.
You get slowly indoctrinated.
Yeah.
At a tolerable pace
dosed.
for you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you get appropriately dosed, so that when the crazy thing happens, you are too far in it. For example, if you're interested, there's a clip on YouTube of Joe Rogan and Leah Remini talking about Xenu.
When she found out about
I've
seen that podcast.
Just go watch that clip if you want to figure it out. But you don't get that information. You don't get to know the origin of your religion until OT 8.
OT8.
Yes, it is the operating Phaeton level 8 of the Bridge to Total Freedom. It is, wait, back it up. OT3. It's OT3 that they find out about Xenu. OT8 is the highest level that you can go to. So at OT3, they tell you about Xenu and the space planes and the volcanoes.
Endor
Is
is
this
part
the
of that.
same planet of Mork and Mindy? Has anybody ever seen Mork and Mindy?
I didn't watch that.
See, I must be old, but
I just can't watch sitcoms.
one of Robin Williams' best sitcoms. You guys are so young.
I think I've seen snippets
you're
of him
just
in a
old.
sitcom thing. Yeah.
You don't find about that until OT3, and you are like handcuffed to the briefcase that the information is in, and you are told that if you tell anybody what this information is, you could give them cancer, you could kill them, like you could hurt someone by telling them this information if they haven't gone through the rest of the bridge first, because it's just such mind-blowing information, and like you have to do all this preparation to get to OT3. And so when Leah Remini is arguing with journalists about like, I don't know what you're talking about, when they try to confront her about her beliefs, and she says, I don't know what you're talking about. She was indoctrinated to believe that if she answered that journalist question truthfully, she would be giving him cancer. Like, that is the level. And so sometimes when you are seeing something from the outside, whether it's just a dyadic relationship between two people, if it's an employee-employer relationship, whatever type of relationship, really imagine these conditions can exist. When you are from the outside looking in and trying to ask people about what's going on, a lot of times the organization has done a very good job at indoctrinating them to believe and protect, and they aren't doing it purposefully. The people are not trying to lie to you. They are just trying to follow the teaching of their church. And then when you get to when you get to OT8, according to
when you get to R2D2,
when you get OT, so OT8 is currently where it ends. That's all L. Ron Hubbard wrote. But genius marketing move by David Miscavige. Take notes, Kaylee. When L. Ron Hubbard died and David Miscavige kind of took the reins of Scientology, he said, aha.
We need 9.
He is L. Ron Hubbard, who is dead of a stroke, is now out researching OT levels 9 through 12.
Oh my God.
And he will be communicating back to us this information so that we can continue to grow. Oh, don't worry. His soul is going to come back at some point. And so there are 3 mansions in the United States that are kept for him, laundered, beds changed, food stocked, his favorite cigarettes sitting everywhere.
He's allowed to smoke.
Well, Scientology can cure lung cancer, so it's fine. Okay. So the idea is that from above, when you look down on these things, the aerial shots of them, they all have these huge, it's literally the O's from Cool Cigarettes, because that's his favorite cigarette brand. And so they have these circles like carved into the landscaping around these houses.
Yeah.
So that L. Ron Hubbard's spirit can find the home and come back and know that he's in a safe place to bring his teachings back to. Never mind that OT8 said, oh, the whole thing was a lie. You were a perfect version of yourself.
Well, the chaos that Doug was saying, there's so much of it doesn't make sense that it's like when you try to confront it, it's just leaving it up to them for the moral authority. I wanted to kind of interject something here. So this is from, you were talking about moral things and rules and stuff like that. So this is from someone in this Mid Ohio Valley area, from a church, a pastor that have said this thing. So this is what they said. He said, direct quote, I got this from YouTube. Okay. So I can have arguments with Christians all day over certain issues, but every issue we argue about is going to come back to one thing: absolute moral authority. See, Americans don't believe that anymore. In the 1960s, the doctrine was introduced to our complete education system, which is controlled by the devil. It was called secular humanism and situation ethics. Secular humanism puts you, instead of God at the top of the food chain, you become the more absolute in your own life. I remember being introduced to me in the 11th grade. I went into a brand new school, an English class. Everyone knew the teacher was a lesbian because she was out, just came out of the closet. And I remember she pulled us into a classroom and she said, now let's make a big circle with our chairs. And I'm not going to just teach you English. We're going to talk about why you believe what you believe. When your parents tell you something's wrong, why do you believe that? Shouldn't you find out for yourself what is right and wrong? For example, your parents might have told you this. Well, why would you believe that? Because they just told you that. Shouldn't you decide for yourself? Now, this is being taught in kindergarten and now teaching your children and being put into textbooks of Johnny Two Mom and Johnny Two Dad. This is crazy. And this is all started in the 60s. And it's like happens in really every generation has decided their authority. In other words, I am my own authority and I decide what is right for me. As long as my decision does not use or injure you, then I have not sinned. So this passage is basically saying that the education system is teaching kids to think for themselves and question authority, and then that's bad because that makes you the moral authority in your life.
Well, and so what I think is being misconstrued, or the emphasis I think is on the wrong issue. Mm-hmm. I think what we're trying to teach people is that you have to question things that are going to, impact your own identity, integrity, your own self. Like, I shouldn't just blindly accept everything that's thrown at me, and I should be able to, because I think that creates vulnerability if you blindly accept everything that is thrown at you and you don't ever question whether that is in the best interest of yourself. And so unfortunately, this emphasis on obedience to an ultimate authority, is this hierarchical kind of emphasis. And what that does is create a lot of lost people, a lot of vulnerability, because we are not teaching people to think. Like, how we didn't get to this world through blind obedience. We got to this place in this world. We've evolved through people challenging the status quo. Through people, we would still have racism. We still have racism, but we would still have slaves and things like that in those situations if it wasn't for people challenging those status quo and people stepping up and saying, no, this is wrong. I don't think it's very smart if we continue to see that something isn't working, but to continue to do it because you don't want to challenge or, say this isn't working. We need to do something differently.
Yeah.
And that's a sad, kind of situation, because what is your motivation to keep everybody obedient? What's the motivation?
Well, and I brought that up because Janice has been talking about this. It's just this moral authority. I know what's best for your life. Don't question me.
Yep. I've got a rant loaded up, ready to go. So my personal belief, as everything that I have shared so far today has been, where to start? One of the things that I like most about myself is that I tend to be skeptical no matter who the source is. I am just general skeptic. I with my mother all the time, and I tell her, I'm going to miss the second coming of God, because I'm going to be like, who are you? Like, absolutely not, friend. I don't believe you because I blindly follow authority.
Noted.
Noted.
Also, I think the idea of teaching children how to respectfully and intelligently question authority is one of the best skills that you can teach children to protect them from future abuse and manipulation.
Yeah.
We have 2 parents in the room, and between the 2 of them, they have 4 daughters. Being a female right now is not safe. It is not safe to be a female. There was that case, Sarah Everard, I believe is how you say her name, in the UK. All she was doing was walking home from a bar, and she was murdered and mutilated on the way home. Not questioning authority. We are not taught to do that as men. As when you are supposed to shut up, speak when spoken to, and always let the man in the room take the lead. So, no thank you. That doesn't sound like something that I want to do. Sorry. But I was allowed to do that. My parents saw that I had some leadership tendencies in me, and they did not attempt to stifle them in me. They said, yes, do that. Be strong. Use your voice. Speak up. Be a leader. And so that's just carried on. I know many women that when they talk to me about things and I give them feedback, they're like, well, that's just something that you can do. I'm like, no, I wasn't born this way. Like, experiences and people allowed me to be this way. So teaching children, though it's very annoying, I'm sure, for parents to question authority, is probably one of the best things you can do to protect them from future undue influence.
Yeah.
If they know what they believe to be right and wrong, because what that quote says to me is that that person is the moral authority. And the thing about all of these cults, they create these, they take higher powers and they put them in a human form. And as a Christian, as a Catholic, I was taught to be skeptical of that. I was taught to be skeptical of false prophets. I was told that many false prophets are going to come. I also, though, like to see the good in people. And so there's always a balance to me between those two things. I can't dislike everybody, but I can be skeptical of everybody until they prove me wrong. And so for really anybody to get up and say that they are the moral authority, because here's the thing, morals do change over time. They do. At one point, it was socially acceptable to make really racist, homophobic, sexist jokes. See any stand-up comedy from the early 2000s. It was acceptable. It was morally and socially acceptable to say those things at that time. It is no longer morally and socially acceptable to say those things. People should be growing. We should be changing. If we constantly stay stagnant, like Doug was saying, for what? For what? We wouldn't have planes. We wouldn't have a cure of cancer. We wouldn't have a COVID-19 vaccine. Where is the benefit? Where is the benefit in the human potential standing still and reaching its ceiling? I don't know that there is one. I would like to argue that there is not, because I like to believe that potential is kind of endless.
Well, and it's also a complete waste of our brain.
Yeah.
So like our brain, cortex, everything about it is so magical and powerful, and just so many things. Like we have done such great things using our brain, and if you stifle it to be obedient, here's the thing: obedient is power over somebody. So being obedient to somebody means somebody is exerting power over you. And so that means that there's victims everywhere. That means there's people being mistreated, and we have a natural desire to be independent. That's a developmental need to have, is to be independent. So the idea of telling people to be obedient goes against our natural biology. And so if you try to squelch somebody's independence, that's actually where you're going to get more challenging behavior. You're going to get more disgruntlement, disagreement.
And that's what I saw when I look at documentaries in the 60s, like with rock and roll coming in and everything. It was all a response to this: do what we say, don't question, here's how things are supposed to be.
So
culture and people are always going to change. You cannot stop it. Even if you tried, I mean, there have been some pretty communist regimes in the past, some of them currently still exist, that are trying to decide how people should behave and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and setting the tone for those things. Most of them don't last because it is in our nature to be trying to do more to be trying to change, to be trying to improve. And you can only stifle that so long in so many people.
Well, and the other thing, and maybe I'm being a little bold in saying this, but is this really people's vision of what God wants for us, is to be mindless little minions who don't think for themselves and don't go about this world? I mean,
well, they would go back and they would say, no, I'm basing it on what the scripture says. What you're saying goes against the scripture, so that's why you shouldn't do it.
I would say that the scripture says that God gave me free will, and I will handle my judgment when the time comes, and the only person that can judge me is God. So that would be my rebuttal to that, as somebody who spent a lot of time at Catholic school and in religion class, is you can try to go through and find an exact code of living in the Bible. You could go through and you could make notes. You could write rules. You could do all of that if you wanted to. Sounds rather dull, but you could do it if you want to. I think we are supposed to be trying to behave as Jesus did when he was with us, according to scripture. We are supposed to be aiming to be the spirit of how he was interacting. He spent time with prostitutes. He spent time with lepers. He didn't shy away from those situations. He went everywhere that people wouldn't go to help people that other people wouldn't help, because we are only as strong as the weakest person. We are only as strong as our weakest person. If we don't help lift up our weakest person, strong the most, that's what we can do. We all need to get better. So the idea that any of us should be bowing down to the way that one person thinks, and that person and the way that they thinks should be determining our behavior. No.
Well, I also think there's probably some elements of gender in this too, that it's typically men that are the ones that are exerting this power over people and this hierarchical approach, because most of our society is paternalistic. And so
that's something that was on a podcast. Yes, sorry.
Down with the patriarchy.
No, I need to look that's something I've been wanting to learn about.
I also think you don't typically see much of that obedient kind of talk, female gender, things like that, and so I think, unfortunately, kind of my own gender tends to kind of mess things up sometimes, and we have to be more progressive about who we are in the world and how we live better lives by taking in multiple ideas, by respecting everyone, so that one of the things that I try to strive for, and I don't always succeed in my leadership style, is to not think I know it all,
right,
and to seek out feedback and ideas from other people. Because that's not, number one, that would not be fun for Janice, who, yes, in the
it
operational,
might be easier, but it definitely wouldn't be funner.
in the operational structure, she's certainly at a lower level in hierarchy, but I don't want her to feel that way in terms of how she can operate and function. Same thing with Kaylee, and even though you're not a direct employee, same thing with you. I want everybody to have a voice, to be able to, because I don't know it all. Like I'm not shy of sharing my opinions. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I am also open to other ideas, and if you think this is going to work, then go for it. And let's see how,
forcing your, and what you're saying, forcing your experience on someone else. So you gave the example in a live stream about if two people get in a car accident, and you try to give the same advice to both those people, they both experience it different. It's not going to work for both of them.
Right.
But it's almost like forcing your experience of a pastor or a cult leader is saying, I did it this way. This is the way that works. Anything you say against me. I mean, this is another pastor literally said from the stage, that's not arrogant. The quote was, it's not arrogance you see from me. I have enough anointing on my life to see where you're headed.
I love verbs. So fun. But
like anointing. So what does that mean? Does that mean, so you're saying you hear from God more than other people?
Yep.
and to know what they want. And so what I love about mental health and with therapy is that you guys are giving people tools, helping people to have tools for themselves, to go out into the world. So thinking for themselves, teaching kids to question authority. So when they go out into the world, they don't get into an abusive relationship. Right. They go, well, wait a minute. No, I don't. That's not okay for someone to talk to me like that.
And for the people out in the audience, when we say question authority, we are not saying like when the teacher asks to put your book away,
you like throw it at her face.
That you throw it at her face. No, it is when someone, tells you to get in this car and it's a stranger doing that, you're going to be like, no, like being able to recognize
when
these
someone
things,
is asking you to do something against your values, something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Alicia had put a comment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just now see it. Sorry.
Mindlessly following orders is responsible for some of the greatest tragedies in human history. We are meant to question and evolve. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, 100%.
And mindlessly doing anything isn't what we should be striving for. To have life and society and human interaction so regimented and well understood that we can do everything mindlessly is quite the opposite of what we would want people to be doing, which is mindfully engaging in the life that you are living, in the choices that you have, in the exposures that you have to things. I am very much a question everything person. Question everything you hear, and then you get to make your own choice. But the other thing that I say to my clients all the time is, opinions are like, insert curse word for donkey. Everybody has one. And the other side of that is everybody's allowed to have an opinion. But when you start treating other people differently based on your opinion, you are now judging them.
Right.
And that is not something that is helpful to anyone. Most of the things that we have said tonight are remove judgment, remove judgment, remove judgment, remove judgment. Because then people get to be who they want to be. They get to be the best version of themselves. That may not be what I think is best for them, but it's not my life. Those aren't my consequences.
And I liked what you said. Shout out for this week. You and Tim's podcast is going out on Thursday.
Yeah.
And so, or tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow's Thursday. But one thing that you had said in there is like, I don't really care what you do as long as you get healing, as long as it improves your life.
I do not care.
Yeah, and I like that. It's getting someone to a healthy place where what is healthy for you, what is going to help you stop abusing substances.
Because I'm not judging how you get to the end. Like whatever you think is the best that you can do. Yeah. Get there and be happy.
Well, and I think if you care about the method of someone's healing, then you're making it about you.
Exactly.
So you want them to do it your way, and that's about you and not about the person that you say you're trying to help. And so I think that is, if you don't try to meet the person where they're at, then it's your agenda that you're pushing and not trying.
And then you're not really helping that person. You are just kind of validating and confirming your own ego through unduly influencing other people to make life choices that suit you.
Yeah. Well, and that's hard to see because I use this example, and I think she's still watching Jordan. I would give her advice, and then I would get upset when I would give her advice, and she would go, and I'm like, did that make you feel better? And she goes,
no.
And I would get upset. I was like, well, why? I'm just trying to help. And it's like then when we were in couples therapy, it was learning that sometimes when we give advice, it's to make us feel better than to make the person feel better.
Yeah, don't fix my problems. Just listen to me complain and tell me that sucks. Yes. Listen. Like I said, mindlessly doing anything.
Oh, she gave us a
smiley face. Mindlessly doing anything is the opposite of how people should be living their lives. If you find yourself mindlessly doing anything, that's probably something that you need to check in with yourself about.
And you've mentioned autopilot. We get into autopilot a lot. Most of our day is autopilot.
Yeah, and I would also kind of, for my nerdy, teach you about the brain moment. That
therapist.
This is a therapist.
Therapist. So when we get stressed, so most people equate like when we have kind of like a stress response, we go into fight or flight, but we actually do other things before we actually get to flight and fight. And there's a sequence of how we do it. And actually the very first thing that we do when we get stressed is flock, what we would call flock, which is to look in our environment and see how other people are responding. So that can make us very susceptible in those moments when we're really trying to figure out how to respond to the stressor based on how other people are acting. So in those environments that we're calling, cults or whatever, they create fear and stress. And so this group think takes place. We are more susceptible to the leader, because we're in an environment where we feel threatened,
We look around and all of these other people are like clapping and, we've talked about non-denominational churches before, and when everybody's hands are up and worshiping, and you look around and you're like, okay, so what am I missing?
Right.
What am I missing? So let me participate in that way, because then there must be a positive.
I'm teetering right now. I'm just gonna say it. One thing that my experience was this, and this is so crazy when I look back on it. When in leadership at a church, we were to be spiritual, interact with the message. Amen. That's good, Pastor. Hands up in worship. And we were told, even if you don't feel it, do it, because someone's going to see you do that and they're going to be inspired to then follow Jesus. But then when I looked at it, I was thinking, when I look back at that, I go, but we were all faking it in some of those moments when we weren't feeling that. So that person getting that was... We were faking it.
But you had to subvert your will and experience and what felt right to you at the moment, because what was the greatest good was the other people who weren't as spiritual as you yet needed to see you being very spiritual.
So one of the things we do in therapy, or a term or at least I use, is like challenge by choice. So we never force somebody into doing so. So especially when we're running group, like if we're going to do like a mindfulness exercise, that everybody has the free choice to close their eyes in the mindfulness exercise or keep them open or whatever. We give them choices and they can choose, or they can choose not to participate in it at all. And so when you are forcing, there's a difference between when that kind of group type cohesion happens naturally and when it is forced. Like to be here, you really need to do what everybody else is doing or you don't really belong here. That forcefulness, that coerciveness that we're trying to manufacture. We're trying to manufacture group cohesion when it's really not there. And I would say that it's not group cohesion because there wouldn't be an element of support, because what would happen is it's not group cohesion, it's following. I'm following the pastor, I'm following the leader. And so if Johnny over here has a problem with what the pastor has to say, the rest of the group would not be like, let me help and support you. It'd be like, you need to get in line. Why are you doing this? Why are you disgracing so-and-so? And so we are not, it's because it's like, you're good to be here as long as you fit in this type of box. And so we don't, this is where in society, we don't respect differences because they're threatening to our brain until we have experience with it. And so we're trying to create this homogeneity. And that's not.
I just went and I have no idea what that word means.
Just sameness.
Well, and I think it adds to stigma, because I remember there was a revival night one time and I was really struggling with something, and I remember everyone was so moved and clapping and everything, and I remember being backstage crying because I was praying, I was doing all these things and nothing was changing, and I just felt like, what is wrong with me? And I think that is a part of that culture really lends stigma. I know there's other people that are going, why don't I feel like singing worship? Why don't I feel like raising my hand? And the kind of language from the stage saying, you serve a God that died for you. How dare you not stand up and give God glory and shout and praise? And it's just a lot of shameful language where people feel, and are you trying to be, and I stopped looking at things in some ways as it being right or wrong. Is it helpful?
Right.
Is you saying that helpful for someone to feel better about themselves?
Right.
And so.
And it creates so much shame.
Yes.
In those, and the thing about undue influence is that the whole system is built around capitalizing on shame. Undue influence of any sort is built on capitalizing on instances and experiences of shame that people feel. Because if you feel bad about yourself and you think that I know what I'm talking about, you may listen to me. I have now changed the way that you think to be more suitable to me. Good on me.
Yeah.
My life now becomes easier. Don't really care about you. Don't really care about you. It's about me. So if I've made my life easier, that means that I've done my job.
I think that's a good place to kind of end that. We went really long tonight, and it was a great discussion. And I think that capitalizing on shame, I think that's a very interesting topic. So whatever you guys, decide with future live streams or talking about things, but we do hope that you guys have found this helpful to talk about these things. And really, Janice, something that you had said tonight that I'm taking home with me is that everyone has the right to autonomy.
Yeah.
And so what I love what they do and with therapy and mental health is that we want to give people tools. We want to give people to be able to listen and to normalize mental health and addiction recovery and all these different things. We want you guys to be able to have autonomy. We want you guys to be able to have the tools to interact with the world and become healthier. And so is there anything you guys want to say to that before we end this stream, or any encouragement you want to give to someone that might be struggling with some of the topics we've talked about, as far as being in something where it's subverting their free will, or their any encouragement that you give to someone that's struggling with mental health?
Everybody has a right to live exactly the life that they would want to. So if you are currently living a life you want to continue to participate in, there are resources, there are options, there are people that can help you through that. If you have people telling you that the way that you are living your life is wrong, and you're questioning like, well, am I? Is this wrong? That also is a perfectly acceptable reason to reach out and ask for somebody else's opinion, to kind of check yourself. Like I tell clients all the time, when you're the only sane resident of Crazy Town, sometimes it's hard to keep perspective on that. And so sometimes you need somebody from the outside to be like, no, kid, you're doing okay.
Yes,
you're really doing okay.
Yeah. It took a therapist to help me, because it got to a certain point where, I've said this, I don't know how many times, where it was like I was kind of going back at her, and she was like, I was like, how do I know that you're saying the truth? You've only heard my side. And she goes, maybe because I'm a professional and then I've seen this before. And I'm like, oh, I didn't believe her.
Yeah.
And so, getting that help. Anything, Doug?
So my biggest thing would be that the brain changes every day of our life. So we're meant to grow. Like, we're not designed to be stagnant or final.
Yeah, we're never done.
We're done. So the growing is always supposed to happen. So what I would encourage people to do, and sometimes this is difficult and challenging, but is to always reflect, to take time in your day to reflect, not judge. Say, oh, I did this bad, I did this good, or whatever, but to reflect. Are things working for me? Am I finding joy in these situations? Thinking about, how can I reflect? Is this working? Is it not working? What could I do differently? How could I make this better? Who can I reach out to if I need help? Any of those types of things. And just keep watching, because I'm sure we'll find something that connects and relates and hopefully empowers people to go out there and make the changes that they've been, thinking about or wanting for so long. And please, just shameless plug, please share.
Yeah.
And
subscribe
and buy a shirt and, just do all the things that we would really love for you to do. So think community and being able to support everyone and respect differences and embrace those differences so that people can feel safe in this world.
Yeah. Please subscribe. And like Doug was saying, and you hear that from every subscriber. You hear that at churches, make sure you like. But one thing that I love what they're doing in these podcasts is that, again, it's giving people tools, giving people information to live their lives better. Not how you guys live your life, how you can live a life that you want. I think that was a really good quote from you, that you had said that people deserve to live the life that they want.
Yeah. Everybody does. No matter what you've done, no matter what's happened to you, everyone deserves to have the best.
And so I would also just kind of, for our audience, I love the people that commented. I also challenge you, if you disagree with something,
Please
please put a comment in there. That's really where we get really good discussion.
Yeah.
And really get to kind of, reflect and analyze and see, let's break it down. Let's look at it a little bit. If there's something we said that you don't really understand, reach out, ask, and just, that's good.
All right. Well, thank you guys again for watching. I'm really liking this live stream stuff and just kind of how it flowed, especially the first hour. I mean, that was off of one quote, and then we kind of got it. I don't even remember what we really talked about the first hour. What was it? Yeah. And so thank you guys again. Tomorrow we have a great segment coming out about spirituality and treatment with Janice and Tim Kraft. And so you can check that out on the Resilient Purpose podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on our YouTube page as well. And so thank you guys again for watching, and have a great evening.
Bye.